Everybody, welcome.
Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're at.
Lovely to see everyone. This is exciting. I'd love people to write in the chat where you're joining me from. I'm in New York City, in downtown Manhattan, and it has turned into fall kind of overnight. You know, it felt like summer last week, and now everyone's got their down coats on. I got a fellow New Yorker in Oregon, Atlanta, Bangalore. Oh my goodness, you're up late. Brooklyn, beautiful Hudson Valley. Look at all of you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to just give us a few moments to get everyone on. We had quite a lot of people sign up for this workshop, which was amazing. I'm so happy with the number of people who've signed up, and I see some familiar faces. Hello, thank you for joining. Um, and I am being supported by James, and he's going to be managing the chat, and James is letting everybody in. So if you see James in the chat, that's great, and he's just going to be trying to keep the conversation going. So this is wonderful. While we're waiting for everybody to join, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides so that everyone can see where we are and what we're doing. Okay. So it feels like maybe I can get started. James, do we have a lot of people still in the waiting room?
I think we're looking pretty good. We got a few folks still floating in, but we got a good group of
Right.
people here. I think we're just about ready to get going. Yeah, we're a couple minutes past the hour.
All right. I want to be conscious of everybody's time, so I'm going to get started. So first of all, again, welcome and thank you so much for joining me in what I hope is going to be a interesting and impactful workshop. So let's get started. Okay, oops, all right. Okay, so who am I? Uh, my name is Linda Secondari, and I'm a creative director and a book strategist. I have a design studio called Studiolo Secondari, and we work with authors and traditional publishers to develop books and to take them to market. And I'm also the creator of the Strategic Author Program, which is a group program that helps authors understand their book the way a publisher would and develop things like positioning so that they can write the book that audiences want and be found by those audiences. And so, how do I have this expertise? I have this expertise because I worked for more than 25 years in-house. And most recently, I was the creative director at Oxford University Press, where I oversaw the publishing of thousands of books a year. And I'm not exaggerating, it was actually 3,000 books a year. And that's a lot. Um, and I coordinated publishing strategy with authors, publishers, marketers, and editors. And so this is what I did day in, day out. Uh, Work with our acquisitions team when they signed on a new manuscript and really look at where that manuscript sat in the publishing ecosystem as it existed now, the impact we wanted that manuscript to have, who the audience was for that manuscript, and how we were going to find that audience and speak this value to that audience. So these are the techniques that I'm talking to you about. So what you're going to learn in this workshop is how to think like a publisher. And what does that mean? That means to assess your manuscript the way a publisher would. We're also going to talk about the economics of traditional publishing, and I'm going to give you an overview of various publishing methods.
Hey, Linda, just to check in, at least I'm not seeing slides. Are we supposed to be seeing slides or
Oh,
do you know?
geez. Yeah, no, you are supposed to be seeing
Okay.
slides. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
of course.
disturbing. Hold on a second. I'm so sorry, people. Give me a sec. All right. Can you see that?
Yes, there we go. It's not quite full screen yet, but we can see it.
Can you see it full screen now?
Now we don't see anything.
Huh, okay, so it goes away when I do that. Okay, here we go. One more time.
There we go. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'll just flip through the the slides I've already gone through just because they're pretty and I'm a designer and I want you guys to see them. So I think I was here talking about being a publisher, assessing your book the way a publisher would. Um, and so, publishers evaluate manuscripts beyond just the writing and the content. They consider, the context around that manuscript, and that evaluation is called positioning. So, what is positioning? That's like a term of art in publishing. People will say, what's the position on that book? So, positioning is, the assessment of these key market inputs that can determine the book's sales potential. So, what does that mean? Here we go. What does that mean? It means that publishers evaluate comparables. So, what other books exist in this genre already?
Hello, may I help you?
And we talk about, could everyone please mute yourselves? That would be super helpful. Thank you. Um, so, we think a lot about a bookshelf. In publishing we say, well, what other books are on that bookshelf? And what we mean is what other books are comparable to that title? What other books would uh, readers who bought X, what other books would they buy? Why? That's comparables. Audience, how large and engaged is that readership? And when you think about audience, we think about these incredible bestsellers, and they sell hundreds of thousands of copies, and that's amazing. But having a enormous audience that's meh, kind of engaged is one thing. Sometimes having a smaller audience of maybe 3,000 potential readers who are deeply engaged, maybe sometimes that's more valuable because those people will stay with you if you're looking at doing additional editions, new books, other aspects of your writing, taking it on the road and speaking tour. That really devoted audience is in some ways going to be more valuable than an enormous audience that's kind of interested. Publishers also evaluate things like the author's status. What credentials does the author have, and that's really for nonfiction. What sort of platform reach do they have, and sales history? So, how have these other books, how have these comparables sold themselves? What is the ecosystem for that genre? What is the tolerance? So, by looking at these different inputs, publishers, agents, and editors evaluate the market for a given manuscript, and then that influences their decisions about whether they're going to sign it or not. So, I'm talking to you about how to distill these ideas and apply them to your own books. And how do I know that? Well, I have 25 plus years in-house publishing experience. I've already described that to you. And I have 8 years of working with real authors in the wild using my proprietary framework. And I have happy authors. My approach has clarified the mysteries of publishing for many authors, and it's a framework, as I said, that's established on best practices and lived experience, my lived experience. And what is that framework? It's the 4 questions to ask and to answer so that you can develop your publishing roadmap. And what are those 4 questions? They're really pretty straightforward. It's why, what, who, and how. So why don't you guys put in the chat what genres you're writing in currently? I think that would be super interesting to see. So why? Why are you writing? Often authors will say, oh, I want to write a bestseller. I want a passive income stream. And while those are completely legitimate and wonderful reasons, they really can't be your primary reason. Now, I will allow that you're not going to get a bestseller, a New York Times bestseller, if you don't publish a book. That's absolutely true. But just because you've published a book does not mean that you're going to get a New York Times bestseller. That is, a perfect storm of all sorts of alchemical influences that make a bestseller, or it's the product of, a name brand, a big name coming out with a book. So while these are absolutely acceptable reasons to want to publish a book, they can't be your primary reason. Realistic motivations for first-time authors are more about, I have a message and I want to share it. I want to boost my authority professionally. Often uh, in certain career paths, not just in academics and academia, it helps to have a book to demonstrate your thought leadership. Maybe you want to develop a legacy, or maybe you just want to fulfill a lifelong dream to be a published author. All of these are really realistic motivations that can keep you going while you're writing. And you can also have, and it wouldn't hurt to be a New York Times bestseller, but your primary motivation has to be something that's more honest and achievable, because you want to have an achievable goal that you can actually achieve, because then you'll feel successful about it. If you set yourself up for not achieving your goal, or having a very slim chance of achieving your goal, then that doesn't set you up for success. So a real life example is an author who I've worked with, Malika Moses, and she wanted to write a children's book for Black kids, because she just didn't see a lot of Black faces in children's books, and she wanted to sort of gift this to the next generation of Black Americans while sharing tools about how to promote pride and resilience. So that was her goal. And she wrote a beautiful book, and we were so honored to work with her on it. And now she is working with educational communities and getting her book out into those communities. So she's fulfilling her mission and achieving her goal, and she feels super proud about it. And so do we. So why does why matter? I'm not going to lie to you, writing a book is hard and it's filled with challenges. But if you have the right why, it's going to motivate you through what I call the pit of despair, which is that like messy, messy middle, when you realize how much more you still have to do and you're so tired from what you've accomplished. And it really will be a North Star. It will be a guiding principle, and it will resonate for you. So why don't you put in the chat why you're writing, and also if anything I've said has perhaps changed your motivations. So the next question is what? What are you called to share? And that is where context starts to come in. You want to understand what other books are on the bookshelf. And we talk about this metaphorically. What other books are on the bookshelf? So you go to a bookstore and you're looking for a yoga book. It's going to be on a bookshelf with a lot of other yoga books. You go to the bookstore and you're looking for an Italian cookbook. On that bookshelf are going to be a lot of other cookbooks, Mediterranean influenced cookbooks. So that's what we mean by the bookshelf. What other books are comparables, right? We were talking about comparables before. So the first thing you have to understand is what your concept is. My concept is to write a business book. And now I'm going to look for comparable titles around business. I'm going to start to refine that a little and find business books that are similar to the business book that I wanted to write. And once I've seen those books, I can see, wow, this is how they're priced. This is what they look like. You know, they're usually they come out in paperbacks, or they are really long, or they're really short. You can begin to understand what the expectations of that genre are while you're still in the process of writing your book. And this all helps you understand your book's position based on your research. And then you might have to do some refining. So this is an example. As I said, let's say I'm writing a book about business, and I am, a woman who's had, upper level management experience, and I want to write a book for, the women that are following me and tell them about the experience of being a woman in leadership. So I go to my trusty Amazon or bookshop.org, and I start researching, you know, women in business. And I quickly see, oh, well, lean in, Sheryl Sandberg, she wrote that book. She's kind of already written that book. And she's Sheryl Sandberg. She was a VP at Facebook. She had, a New York Times bestseller. Um, and then there are other names, Brene Brown. This bookshelf to me looks like it's inhabited by some pretty big names who have already staked their claim to this territory. But that doesn't mean I can't pursue my dream of writing a book about business, about being a woman in business. And I like to use this example of Jen Sincero. Now, I didn't work with Jen Sincero, so I'm making some assumptions here, but I think that Jen Sincero kind of did that same comparables research. And she thought, well, I'm not going to compete with Cheryl and Brene, but who am I? I'm a millennial. I'm a kind of upper middle management millennial. And I'm going to drill down into that. I am going to drill down into my casual, snarky, you know, fun, irreverent millennial attitude. And I'm going to create a book for my people. And I will tell you, she is amazingly successful. I mean, look, she's got 3 books to Cheryl's one, and she's got t-shirts, she's got mugs, she's got all the things. She has a brand. She has developed that badass brand. And she has, in Kindle, she has 46,000 reviews, whereas, Cheryl appears to have 97, which I don't even understand. But this is what I'm talking about, the enthusiasm. When you potentially have a narrower pool, you're only looking at millennials who do management, who are aspiring to do management, but as opposed to all women who could be managers. But that smaller pool is down with you. They are loyal. They're buying all the books. They're buying the t-shirts. They're going to your lectures. That's the audience you want to have. And then inevitably you get the trend followers. So you get your boss bitch and your, how to be a boss bitch and rich bitch. They're trying to make hay in the sun that Jen Sincero created. And they're not as successful because I don't believe that they're as authentic as Jen was. So when you're looking at comparables and thinking about positioning, you have to understand the kind of ebb and flow of trends. So when you're looking at those other titles, you want to be sure that you're looking at the date they were published so that you can sort of understand where you are kind of between the bell bottoms and the skinny jeans. Are the skinny jeans over and now you should be leaning more towards the bell bottoms, or vice versa? So currently, I think, snarky has had its day and we're oversaturated and we're moving towards a more kind of refined ethos. And I think that's where you get these trad wives and all of that kind of more conservative cultural perspective coming out to the fore. it's a reaction, and we're gonna go from trad wives to snarky, back to trad wives, back and forth the way we do from bell bottoms, skinny jeans. But it's important to kind of understand where you are in the trend so that you're not diving in deep to a trend that's kind of over. The sell by date is completed. So these are just some visual examples of comparables. uh, because this is a talk and these are slides, and I just thought it would be interesting for you to see how, even just by seeing the covers, not even having the book information about these books, that you can understand how this gives you a sense of your bookshelf, right? How this gives you a sense of where you are, where this book was. So this is a client that I had who is writing a noir detective novel. So these are some comps that we came up with for him. And then this is another book by Jabari Kalfani, who is a Black slam poet. And we developed these comps for his title when we were helping him position. So in terms of comparables, I know this is a lot, uh, and you guys will be getting a link to this recording so you can jot this all down later on. But basically, you want to know the author, the title, the publisher, the publication year, the editions. Books often come in as hardcovers in a first edition, then they become paperbacks. Is there an ebook? Is there an audiobook? What are the prices? What's the book length? The book category. So if you look on Amazon, it tells you, this is book, this is 103,000 bestseller in this category. Look at those categories and also read the descriptive text. How is this book being described? All of those things will help inform your own thinking about your book. And then, little tip, look at the acknowledgments. Do they thank an editor or an agent? Because if they do, and this is a recently published book, maybe those are editors and agents that you can tap with your book if your book is aligned well uh, and comparable. So why don't you guys put in the chat whether you've ever researched your book's comparables? So question number 3 is, who is your audience? So when sort of one of the key principles of marketing is to always be thinking about your audience and to really understand your audience. I like to think of audience avatars, make little stories for my audience. Sally is home with her kids, but wants to go back to work when her youngest is in kindergarten, and is interested in pursuing a career in X. Really try to understand who Sally is. Where does Sally buy her books? How does she find out about her books? As you create these avatars, you then can see how your book is going to address their needs. Or if it's a work of fiction, what do they love? What are they yearning for? Is it escapist fantasy, or is it, history, or what do they want to do? And where do they find their books? Do they find their books online? Is it TikTok perhaps? Or do they find out about them through reading groups or at the bookstore, in the library? And how do they read books? Not all genres read books the same way. Certain genres, philosophy, for instance, peculiar to me, uh, is a very ebook heavy audience. I don't know why I find that so interesting. I thought philosophers would want to have, beautiful books on their bookshelf, but apparently the majority of philosophy books really sell well as ebooks, as do certain kinds of romance, whereas history tends to be a hardcover audience. So thinking about going to bookstores, researching your comparables, talking to librarians and bookstore owners or book buyers about your book, about your genre and your audience, all these things will help inform where you take your book. So who's your most likely audience? You know, that's your primary audience. But then you could expand it to a secondary market and even a tertiary market. So you have your avatar for Sally, then maybe there's an avatar for Bo, who is a guy who's staying home with his kids, or has had some other gap in his career and is returning to the workplace. How do they buy their books? What are they looking for in a book? Um, and as I said, look at similar books and look at how they're being promoted. Um, and then talk to all the channels and really make use of libraries, because libraries are such an amazing resource. Number one, you can do this research without actually having to buy the books. If you want to read the acknowledgement section to see,
Is it muted?
I'm sorry, could everyone please mute themselves? James, can you mute everybody, maybe?
Yeah, I'm trying to find who it was or who it is. I'm just
Okay.
scrolling through the list of names here.
Okay.
I think I caught who it was, but I'm not positive.
Okay. So if everyone could just make sure they're muted, that would be
Yeah,
super
thank you,
helpful.
everybody.
So libraries, as I said, they're amazing research areas where you can, get books in your hands. You can do research in the acknowledgements. You can see who the editors are. You can also talk to the librarians. I mean, librarians, buy books for a living, quite frankly. And not only do they buy books, but they curate their collections. So they're not just buying books. I mean, they're really thinking about the books that they purchase with their very limited library budgets. They want to make the most of it for the readers now and for the readers of the future. And they are so happy to talk to anybody about books. So they're great brains to pick. So a marketing tip is to take your readers along for the ride. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're writing a book, start telling everybody, if you don't have a social media account, start a social media account. Maybe think about doing a newsletter and tell everyone, I'm going to be writing a book, and continue to give them updates throughout this process. That will take, months, years. Who cares? What you're doing is you're engaging with them. And you may start out with a social media, platform of, 25 of your family members and your closest friends. But if you are diligent and you are regularly updating and you're making those meaningful updates, you're telling people about the things that you're grappling with and asking them, how what do you think I should entitle this book? Or there's lots of ways to get engaged with your audience. But if you start off slow and you start early, it will build and it will continue to build, and by the time you are publishing your book, however that is, and your book is there in pre-order status, and you want to ask them all to order a book so that the day that it sells, it's got a bunch of purchases going through, which all the algorithms on all of the platforms love to see that. You've built that audience, and depending on your goals and your audience, and maybe that's 100 people, maybe it's 1,000 people, maybe it's 10,000 people. But these are people who are deeply engaged with you and the story that you're telling. And they're engaged because they were included from the beginning and they have ownership in it. So I would love you guys to put in the chat if you know where your reader finds the books that they love. So now we are at, and so this is the business of publishing. This is Publisher's Lunch, which is a newsletter that goes out Monday through Friday, uh, every week, and it's a subscription newsletter. Everyone in the industry is subscribed to Publisher's Lunch, and they describe all of the book deals that have happened in the last 24 hours or the last week, whenever they find out about them. And these are the way the book deals are described. There's the nice deal, which is anything from $1 to 49,000, all the way to major deal, which is $500,000 and up. So these are the realities of what publishers are paying as to sign an author. But what does it mean if you get a nice deal? So before I tell you what it means if you get a nice deal, um, a little caveat is to understand that 2 to 5% of submitted manuscripts are contracted by traditional publishers. And what does that mean? That means that everyone who submits manuscripts through the traditional channels, going through an agent or going directly to an editor, if that publishing house allows direct submissions, only 2 to 5% of those manuscripts are ever actually contracted by a publisher. So, that's a number. And then the other thing to think about is if we look at 2020, 2.6 million books were sold online, but 268 of them sold more than 100,000 copies, and that's 0.01%. So that's not even 1%, that's 0.01%. And what that means is that the remaining 2.4 million, or more than that, really 2.6 million books, less 268 of them, they sold for significantly less than 100,000 copies. So this is just to help you understand why publishers approach signing a contract with an author, you know, with a lot of intention, and they do all of this research and this thinking about the book because not a lot of books are incredibly successful. So in terms of the business of publishing, you hear a lot about royalties and advances and all this. So I thought it would be worth my while to really explain what all of these things mean and to give you a scenario so that you could see how they work. So an author advance is the money that the author receives when they sign with a publisher. So the publisher has received their manuscript from the agent or a direct submission if they permit that. A lot of publishers will not allow direct submissions, but some do. Um, and so they've received the manuscript, they've evaluated it in all the ways that we've just talked about, and they're like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's sign this book. They negotiate their contract with you, your agent, your lawyer, however it is that you are being represented, and you sign and you get this lump sum payment. Then you also, in that contract, will be given a royalty percentage. And that is the amount of money that you make on every book that's sold. But before you get your royalties, you have to earn out your advance. And that means that for every dollar that you received in advance, you have to earn $1 back from book sales before you can begin receiving any payments. So what does that look like? Let's say you received a $30,000 nice deal advance, and your royalty is 15%. And the book is selling for $20. You're getting $3 for every book. But you need to sell 10,000 books to earn out your advance. And then you'll start making $3 a book. If your book is selling 2,000 books a year, it's going to take you 5 years to earn out your advance. If your book sells more quickly, better. If it sells more slowly, it's going to take longer. But this is a means of illustrating how the advance is impacting your royalties. And I do just need to make it clear that your agent, everything goes through your agent. When you sign the contract with the publisher, the agent gets the money. They take their 15% of your advance and they give you the 85%. When the royalties start flowing through to you, The agent gets paid by the publisher probably once a year with a royalty statement. The agent takes their 15% and then they distribute the rest to you. So, it is a pie, and a lot of people have a piece of that pie. And this is the traditional publishing model, and it's a business. So there's actually 4 different ways to publish books. There's the traditional method, which I've talked to you about in terms of the economics of it. There's the hybrid method, there's crowdfunding, and then there's self-publishing. So the traditional method, as I said, that's Penguin Random House, Hachette, Simon and Schuster, all of those names. And they have, imprints like Knopf and Crown and all of that. And that's a very kind of traditional process of going through an agent, most likely with a proposal, your manuscript, the agent accepts you, then the agent pitches you to editors, you negotiate the contract, and so on. And, it can be wonderful. It can be an amazing experience, but there's a lot of people who are getting a piece of your pie. And, you're going to get 10 to 15% of the list or the net, depending on how your contract's negotiated. So, your piece of the pie is getting smaller and smaller. Then your agent's going to take 15% of your 15%. So you can see hybrid publishing, that is a traditional publisher, in that you are submitting a manuscript and they have to accept your manuscript. It's not a vanity press in which you're just, submitting a manuscript and they will publish your book for you because you're paying for everything. That's more of a self-publishing model. Hybrid publishing, you go through the submission process, but the business model is slightly different in that your royalty rate is higher, typically 30 to 40%, but you do end up paying for aspects of the actual production of the book that you wouldn't pay for in a traditional publishing model. So it's more of a relationship with the hybrid publisher. So they're giving you more money if your book is successful, but you're part of the investment where there's risk attached. Before the book is published, before anyone really knows how successful it's going to be, you're participating in that investment. Then crowdfunding is an amazing way to fund a book and to get your book directly into the hands of your author, of your audience, and to have that platform, that community where you're telling them how the book is going and they're excited about it and supporting you. But it really only works for certain genres. It's amazing for anything in the sort of fantasy, romance area, anime, comics. Those are huge. I've seen books be successful. Natural history, not natural history, but animal. Photos of like animals in the wild do super well, but other areas not so much. Uh, it's a wonderful way to fund the production of your book, but developing the Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunding platform, uh, the little website that you have to create to get the audience to notice you, that is very time consuming, and you really need to develop a lot of marketing assets for that, including sometimes prototypes of your book, and that can be very, very expensive. And then there's self-publishing. Self-publishing, you bear the full expense, but if when the book sells, you also make all of the money. Um, and so a huge expense in terms of your time and effort, but a revenue reward is high. And the thing that you need to be aware of is you really need to make sure that you're working with reputable publishing professionals. Unfortunately, there are a number of not so reputable publishing professionals doing assisting authors in self-publishing, but there are also many like myself who do a very honest job, who work with authors that they're really excited to support. Um, so those are the 4 different ways that you can publish a book. And you really don't need to think of these as silos, so much as, paths that can cross. It is absolutely happened a few times where a self-published book has been quite successful, and then a publisher has approached the author and negotiated contract, and then started to publish it traditionally because of the success that they saw in the self-publishing arena. And then similarly, sometimes published authors will choose to take their copyrights back and self-publish. And I'm currently working with an author who's doing just that. He is reissuing his book and is doing it on his own because he has a platform. He knows his audience. He can sell directly to them. Financially, it's going to be beneficial for him to not have to share the money with a publisher, and he's really confident about this book already. So there are opportunities to go from one to the other. And so you don't have to think of it as, I'm making this one choice and I'll never be able to change my mind. So I am also the publisher for the Graphic Artists Guild, and we publish our handbook for pricing and ethical guidelines every 3 to 5 years. And it's a significant imprint. We will sell 20 to 30,000 units for each edition, which, you can see it makes a lot of money. And in previous editions, we had been published by traditional commercial publishers. Um, and we just weren't getting the engagement that we felt that we deserved given the value of the copyright. And so we kind of expanded what we thought of as potential publishing partners, and ultimately decided to co-publish with MIT Press, which is an academic publisher. And they've been a wonderful team member for us and super supportive. And I'm showing this example to demonstrate that, sometimes we have our heart set on a specific publisher and we think, oh, they're perfect for it. But really, to be a little more open to other influences, whether that's a different publisher or a different publishing method, as I just described the 4 publishing methods. Um, being open to that can sometimes bring you a lot of opportunity where you didn't expect it. And I did do a Kickstarter book last summer for the Jazz Age lawn party, and unfortunately it wasn't successful and we weren't funded, but I learned a ton. And I certainly learned that Kickstarter is an amazing platform for the right kind of book. And I think everyone should explore it as an opportunity, at least to see if it's right for your genre. So I wonder, which publishing path is your first choice, and do you have a backup plan? And the reason I ask about a backup plan is because it's important to have a backup plan. We all, have our first choice. I want this, but just like I said, having a New York Times bestseller can't be your sole motivation. Getting published by X House or getting published in this way, that certainly can be a motivating factor and something you can work towards. But having a backup plan, if that doesn't work, is going to make you clear in terms of the steps that you need to take to move to the second stage. Because writing a book is hard. It takes a long time. It's a very solitary experience. And you really don't want to get to the point where you've got this great manuscript. You've thought about your comparables, you've considered all of these things, but your favorite publisher didn't accept your manuscript and you're just sort of a puddle of despondency and don't know how to move forward. So I'm not saying don't feel your feelings, but definitely have a backup plan because in 2025 and in the future, there's so many publishing opportunities available to you. And I want everyone to leave this talk feeling empowered, not overwhelmed. So what should you do? You really need to understand your why. That is really, I think, the most important piece of this entire process, understanding what motivates you and why, and why you're doing this, because it's a long road, and I'm not going to lie to you. And you're going to need that why in your back pocket. You need to research your comparables and develop your positioning. And then you need to get help if you need it. And there's so many opportunities to get assistance, including writing coaches and writing groups and courses. And of course, there's my strategic author program. Our next cohort is starting in mid-November, and we are accepting applications now. And I would love to tell you a little bit more about that. But I do want to mention that I have a special offer for all of you who have signed up for this workshop and attended it. And I'm so grateful for all of your time. And if you can fill out an application by before midnight on Friday this week, and you join the program for this cohort, I will be offering a free 30-minute mastermind, and that's a $275 value that will be offered to you free as a demonstration of my gratitude. So now, if you will, we're going to do questions in a second, but if you will allow me, I am going to just walk you guys through my website for the strategic author, and just talk to you a little bit more, and then we'll get to questions. So, as I said, the strategic author is a guided program. It's a very small cohort. Each group has 4 to 6 members, so it's not a massive team. You get a lot of one-on-one time with me, and you are placed in a curated cohort. It's a 3-month program, so it's got a beginning and an end. It's not one of these things that kind of like goes on forever. And it's here to address the problem that you're writing a book, but are you writing the right book? So that's where, you're looking at your comparables, you're thinking about your audience, you're thinking the way Jen Sincero did, maybe with lean in, kind of taking up all the air in that space. How can I drill down into who I am authentically, find my people authentically, and maybe be even more successful? So these are the things that we'll be talking about. You've already met me, and you know about my background. And so I'm teaching you how to think like a publisher. So whether you're sitting with a manuscript, a partial manuscript, a full manuscript, or maybe you're just in idea mode, you're unsure how to position your book, how to pitch it, you want feedback that's strategic. I am not a writing coach. I am a positioning coach. I'm a strategic coach. So I'm going to look at your manuscript. I'm going to hear you talk to me about your manuscript, and we're going to talk about positioning, and you're going to learn the tools that I've just kind of described and utilize them so that you can position yourself. So I'm kind of like teaching a person how to fish. You can fish for the rest of your life with this information, as opposed to me doing it for you. And you're going to use my framework, my 4 questions framework, and it's going to deliver the result, because this is how I work with my authors one-on-one all the time, and that's what it does. You're going to have descriptive copy so that if you are pitching to agents and editors, you're going to know how to package that, how to talk about your book. You're going to have an elevator pitch. If you end up self-publishing, you'll have really great descriptive text for the online sales page and for the back ad. And it's $2,500 for 3 months. And the next cohort begins at the middle of November. And as I said, it's 4 to 6 authors in a group, 3 months, 2 60-minute sessions a month, and then an office hours on one of those off weeks that we're not meeting. And that's a drop-in session where anyone can drop in with questions. If you can't make that, you can email me the question. I'll record the answer and send it back to you. And then we have a Slack channel So the members of the cohort can communicate through that. And then there's optional add-ons if you want to work with me more independently, manuscript review, strategy calls, and we'll have an ongoing accountability group. Those are in addition to the cohort. So I think I've done that part, and now we can take some questions.
Linda, I've got some questions set aside for you.
Okay, excellent.
First one just came in. It's about the program specifically, so I'll ask that first. This is from Andrew, who wants to know, with so many applicants, how do you decide who makes the cut for the November cohort?
Um, I am, hoping to curate these cohorts based on, different criteria, like the genre that they're publishing in, potentially how much experience they have, where they are in their manuscripts. I ideally am going to have 3 cohorts, so I have room. And as I said, my goal is to curate each of those cohorts based on, um, different criteria and interest, engagement.
Great. And Michael's just asked in the chat, does the workshop include comp research and persona development?
Yeah, so absolutely. I give you the tools to do the comp research and the reader avatar development. And then, we'll talk about it during the session. Then you have some homework. There's the office hours. If you're not clear on, how you're doing or you want some feedback, you can participate in the office hours. You can bring it up in the next cohort session, and then we move on to the next topic.
Great. And I've got 2 questions from earlier when we were talking about the why and the what. I'll ask them together because they're very similar. Lydia said, what if I'm a little afraid to research and someone else has the same idea? Similarly, Natalie asked, how should I do this without, meaning research, how should I do this without giving away the idea?
Okay, so no one is you. Okay, so people can, often things are kind of in the ether, and you hear that in music or, so many things in the art. There's like, who did it first, But at the end of the day, nobody's you. Picasso, Braque, they both came up with cubism kind of independently, but sure, it looks cubey, but actually it looks really different when you look at a Braque and you look at a Picasso because they're each their own people. So always remember that, and don't worry about, oh, someone else is doing it first, because you're going to do it your way. It's going to be unique. And similarly, I believe that by releasing ideas, they get more powerful. I don't believe in hoarding. Scarcity is not a mindset that I think is successful. And I understand, life sometimes teaches us to be scarcity in our mindset, but giving away an idea isn't anything I'm concerned about, because again, only you are going to execute that idea the way you would. So if you're concerned about like maybe talking to a librarian or a bookseller, I wouldn't be, but maybe don't tell them the whole thing. Don't give them the like finale. Don't give them the description of every single character, or whatever methodology that you're going to be working with. Don't tell them everything, but you can tease it definitely without giving away too much.
Awesome. Another question I had set aside earlier from Christina when we were talking about being the marketer persona. Christina
Mhm.
asked if we should create a social media account for the book too. So how would you suggest kind of approaching that,
I
Linda, in
love
terms
that.
of
I love
having your
that
own
so
brand and the
much.
book?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would absolutely say yes. Absolutely. I myself have done that. I love, love, love that. Um, but don't let your social media not be engaged with it. So you're kind of going to be like the two faces of Janice. You're going to have your social media page for the book and then your page. So I do this myself. I have Studio Low Secondari and I have Linda Secondari. Linda Secondari just has more followers just because that page has existed longer, and I I don't know, I put my son's graduation or my daughter's graduation, and then all of a sudden I have, everybody's paying attention to it. So the algorithm just likes me better than than my professional page. But those two pages can talk to each other, so that's great. I worked with an author where we created a Twitter handle for all the main characters in her story, and they started engaging with each other, and then the algorithm went nuts because the algorithm thought that like they were completely disparate people. I mean, that's gaming the system, so absolutely.
Great. We've also had a couple questions, one from Michael and one earlier from Dr. Patricia Ramirez, who were both, I'll summarize, essentially asking about the possibility of like taking one publishing path first, like maybe self-publishing on Amazon, and then being open to doing like a second path later on. Is that something you could talk about?
Yeah, so I absolutely. And as I said, I mean, there are a few examples. I have one behind me, uh, eldest, Paolini. I don't remember what his first name was, but he wrote this saga about a dinosaur and not a dinosaur, a dragon, and self-published it. His parents were booksellers, so they knew something about books, and then he got like a massive deal with Scholastic or some huge, like a 5 book deal with like a huge, young adult publisher. And you can absolutely do that. And then I gave the example of my client, Dr. Tom Hendrickson, who has a textbook. He's done 2 editions of this textbook, and now he's like, you know what? I can sell that directly and make so much more money. So I'm publishing the 3rd edition myself. So I'm working with him to produce that book, and he's going to self-publish that from his platform. So those absolutely happen. And the same with Kickstarters. You can do a Kickstarter book, get everyone who bought the book their books, and then you can go on and sell that on Amazon. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So those paths really do intersect more often than I think people allow themselves to believe.
Great. One more question we have handy, and I know we're coming up on time, so this might be the last one. But Tanya had asked, what about the possibility of starting a Substack or a Patreon or a podcast, just kind of thinking through different ways to build visibility, Linda? And this may be more than you have time for right now, but maybe you want to talk about how this kind of fits into the program. Up to you.
Yeah, so I think all of those, I take all of that as basically creating your platform. So your platform could be your social media, it could be a newsletter, it could be a Patreon, it could be a Substack. Um, but basically, what you're doing is you are engaging directly with your audience because that's what you want. Even if you are traditionally published, you want to engage directly with your audience for a number of reasons. Number one, when you sell through Amazon, even your publisher has no idea who's buying those books. So it's great. You're selling 10,000 books. Yay. But who are those people? You don't know them. And if you are being traditionally published and then you're like, you know what, I could do this on my own, that publisher is holding on to that, all of that information, whatever information they have, they're holding on to it. They're not sharing it with you. But in the meanwhile, while you're doing the traditional publishing, if you have a platform and a mailing list and social media and all your people know where you are and they come because you do downloads or little sessions or, whatever it is that works with your genre, um, then you know who those people are and you can sell directly to them if you decide you want to. So it's important to do all the things. Unfortunately, I know that feels a little overwhelming and some people don't feel like they're up to it, but a well executed strategy around maintaining your readership relationship can be not as arduous as you may think, and is really very important in 21st century publishing. Okay, so I really just wanted, so we got past this one. Okay, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming to this event. I'm just overwhelmed by the response, and that 99 of you are still here a minute before it's over is just like so warms the cockles of my heart. So thank you so much. And I would love to keep in touch with all of you through my newsletter. We're going to send, a follow-up email with a link to this recording, and we'll include information about the newsletter. But, that's a great way to keep in touch with me. I hope that you've learned something and that you're going to move forward with your book. I would love to be a part of that. So please, think about applying to the strategic author. And I also want to thank James, who's just been like amazing for me, so helpful in helping me manage all of this and create this workshop. So thank you, everybody, and it's really been an honor and a thrill to be with all of you. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
All righty. Bye bye, everybody.